Yeah. Yes.
I'm Amy Wisty on the executive committee, and parent of 2 college students. How do you feel about the requirement that they be registered?
I think it's, I mean, it was a requirement, the requirement that people's voter registration address match their driver's license address mostly creates a lot of confusion for students who, of course, may live in East Lansing or Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti, but, you know, have grown up in Escanaba or Houghton or somewhere else. And so the requirement says, there's actually 2 things here that sort of connect to make it difficult for students to vote. The first requirement says that if you register to vote at your college, then your driver's license address has to change because they have to match. So that means a lot of college students will say, well, I want to register to vote then where my parents live because I'm on their insurance, I don't want to have a different driver's license address and all those things. So as a result, most college students are forced to register where they're from, not where they're in school. Now that is a problem because I think college students, if they want to vote in their local election where they're in school, they should be able to do so. And I say that as someone who ran for office as a college student in Wellesley, Massachusetts, successfully, getting other students to vote for me, and also being a voice for the college in the town government as a student, which was really important because students are affected by those local government decisions. So I think it's important for students to have a voice in the town where they're at, in those elections. The second piece is the requirement that the first time you vote, if you register to vote by mail, which basically means if you don't register to vote in your clerk's office, in your home clerk's office, you have to vote in person at your home precinct. So that means these students who are in East Lansing and their home's in Escanaba, and they register to vote and they stay in Escanaba because they don't want to change their driver's license address, that means they have to go back to Escanaba to vote on election day in November, sometimes in the middle of finals and all those things. They have to go back to Escanaba to vote if they want their ballot to count. They can't vote absentee that first time. So I think that's a problem as well. I think that's a barrier. In other states, what other states do is, other states have different legislation that allows people to get around it. If you, for example, if you register to vote by mail in Iowa, you can, when you register, also hand over a copy of your driver's license, and that will serve as your identification, enabling you to vote absentee the first time. Because basically the law is in place to verify that you're a real person, and if you're voting absentee, there's no verification. So there's laws. I'd like to change the legislation to enable people to vote absentee their first time, with certain protections in place. But before we do that, what the Secretary of State's office can do before the law is changed is make it so that if you, okay, so right now, if I'm in East Lansing as a student, I have to go back to Escanaba to vote in person the first time. Unless I go to Escanaba and show my ID to a clerk there, to the clerk in Escanaba, and say, I am who I say I am, and request my absentee ballot in person. That's a sort of loophole around the law that allows people to vote absentee the first time. I would make it so that you could go into any Secretary of State's branch office in the state, show your ID, and get an absentee ballot application, and get basically the flag removed from your file that says you're a first-time voter, and that would enable you to then request an absentee ballot from your home clerk. This is something that was put in place a few days before the election in November 2008. Not many people knew about it, so not many people took advantage of it, but I'd want to put it in place forcefully as Secretary of State so that people know that essentially if they do register to vote at their college with their home address, all they have to do is go to a Secretary of State's branch office, verify their identity, and request an absentee ballot and vote absentee through that process. It's a very sort of long-winded and technical reform, but it's what I would do to get around and make sure that basically students can vote, and that it's less confusing when they do so. And that's why, I mean, just to sort of end that, not to babble on too long. I think, that sort of, I think, illustrates why it's important to have someone in that office who knows the law and knows how to interpret the law in a way that makes voting more accessible. And that's, what I just said is sort of an example of how we can get around a current law to make voting more accessible while keeping protections in place for the integrity of the system.
One of the issues, too, is if they're living in the dorm, they're at that address for 9 months.
Yeah.
And every year, my daughter's license has, I don't know how many stickers already on it, because every time she has to change her driver's license.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's a problem.
It's just simple, she's not.
And of course, it originated out of Mike Rogers' attempt to make it so East Lansing, students in East Lansing couldn't vote for him.
Yeah.
So. And then he won by 111 votes. But so yeah, I mean, I think the basic point is the law is problematic, but I'm always focused on, you know, as Secretary of State, I'm going to advocate for those laws to be changed, but that's the legislature's job.
Yes.
My question is, how can we use that office to work within the law to create a way to administer the law that promotes access, like I was just sort of explaining. So there's the great thing about the law is that they leave it up to interpretation, many things up to interpretation by judges and by administrators. And as Secretary of State, you're charged with administering campaign finance and election law. And so you have a lot of opportunity to make sure laws are enacted in a way or applied in a way that promotes access to the vote. Yes?
Joan Antela from Houghton. Two things I want to say. First of all, in person you're an even more compelling candidate than you were on the Tim Skubik show. So I'm delighted that you're traveling as much around the state to make personal presentations. But the other thing, for what it's worth, over the years, the thing that has really disturbed me about secretaries of state is that the minute they come in, they have to change the big signs over all the offices with their own name in big letters. I would hope that in view of the state's economy currently, you wouldn't feel it necessary.
The first thing I'm going to do is cut my salary to improve poll worker training. So I'm certainly not going to spend extra money to put my name on signs.
Very good.
Brian Dusky.
I just had a comment to make, you know, that you've come here like a dynamo. You know, the Secretary of State to me has just been the picture on the wall and Candace Miller or somebody underneath it, and that's it, a dry office. And now it seems like it's as exciting as running for president or governor.
It is to me.
I mean, you pointed out all the possibilities that, my gosh, this dry office has a life to it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's what excites me about it, and made me write a book about it. And you know, I just think it's it can do so much to serve the state, and I'm really excited to be a part of a campaign that's trying to do